Night clung to the kingdom of Orun like ink to parchment. The palace torches burned low, their flames shivering as if they sensed the news preparing to shake the halls. In the highest chamber of the royal keep, Prince Iremo sat alone before the ancient crown of elders. It rested inside a glass reliquary that hummed faintly, as though holding its breath. You are welcome to my channel, my dearest listeners. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you for a small favor. If you like my stories, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. In the comment, let me know which country you are listening from. It gladdens my heart to know where my listeners are based. Thank you. Iremo had seen the crown 1,000 times, but tonight it felt strangely awake, like a creature observing him from behind a veil. Its gold was not smooth, but textured with tiny swirling patterns, each line carved by monarchs long buried. Gems arranged in constellations winked at him, following him whenever he moved. It was said the crown chose its wearer, not the other way round. A convenient legend Iremo always thought, until now. Behind him, an old gate creaked open. High Sage Olukorede entered, robes rustling like pages in a forbidden book. "Your father grows weaker," the sage murmured. "The council will soon demand the ritual of succession." Iremo did not turn. They want a king, not a son who still makes mistakes. The sage approached, his staff thudding lightly. Every king begins as someone who misunderstands his own courage. Iremo's jaw tightened. "Just tell me why you summoned me here at this hour." The sage studied him, eyes glowing with a soft ember of pity or pride. Iremo couldn't tell which. "Because the crown spoke." That pried Iremo's attention free at last. "Spoke?" "Yes," Olukorede leaned on his staff. "It whispered your name." Iremo felt the room tilt, as though an invisible river swept beneath the floor. "If that were true, why do you sound worried?" "Because a whisper is only the beginning," Olukorede replied. "You cannot claim the crown unless you fulfill the ancient rite. You must cross the 7 rivers of ordeal." A tremor threaded through Iremo's spine. The 7 rivers were stories parents told to scare stubborn children into obedience. Tales of waters that devoured, cursed, or deceived. No one alive had ventured beyond the first 2 and returned whole. "That can't be the only path," Iremo said, though his voice quivered. "The crown chooses a ruler who can shoulder an entire kingdom's storms. These rivers test the storms already inside you." As the words settled, the reliquary glass misted from within. A pressure pushed outward, gentle yet significant. The crown's faint hum grew into a shimmering resonance, like a distant choir inhaling. Iremo stepped closer despite his pulse hammering. Shadows thinned around the crown, and a faint whisper spiraled into the air. His name, again, soft but certain, not a call, a challenge. He swallowed. "If I refuse?" "Then the crown slips again," Olukorede said, "and the kingdom falls into a scramble of contenders. War will chew through our borders. Your father's legacy will become a ruin." Iremo closed his eyes. He saw the faces of the people in the markets, children chasing goats through sunlit dust, smiths singing over their anvils, all of them vulnerable to the kind of chaos that power-hungry lords adored. When he opened his eyes, the crown glowed as though expecting an answer. "I will go," he said quietly. The words felt heavy but right, like seeds pressed into fertile soil. Olukorede bowed his head. "At dawn, you leave through the eastern gate. The first river waits in the Valley of Echoes." Iremo exhaled slowly. Dawn seemed both far away and already at his throat. He touched the hilt of his father's ceremonial blade, a weapon meant for ceremonies rather than battle. Its surface reflected his face, uncertain yet stilled by a spark newly awakened. As Olukorede departed, the chamber light dimmed. The crown emitted one final whisper, barely brushing the air, a secret shared only with him. Do not falter. Aremu stood alone in the hush. Outside, the kingdom slept unaware that its future now balanced on the courage of one reluctant heir and 7 rivers eager to judge him. Morning would come soon enough.
The dawn rose shyly, its first light slipping through the eastern gate like a curious child. Horses snorted steam into the morning chill as the guards made space for Prince Aremu. He wore no royal colors, only a traveler's cloak, coarse enough to hide any lingering princely shine. Across his back, the ceremonial blade rested uneasily, as if it missed the safety of palace walls. Olukorede stood by the gate, leaning on his staff as if it anchored him to the earth. The Valley of Echoes is not far, he said, but remember, the danger begins long before you see the river. Aremu mounted his horse. What should I expect? Yourself, the sage replied, in more forms than you wish. The horse trotted forward, hoofs thudding like slow drums. As the gate groaned shut behind him, Aremu felt the final thread tying him to the palace snap free. The road ahead stretched like a long exhale across the plains. The lush farmlands of Oron faded into stony ridges and stubborn shrubs. Birds swooped low, trailing notes that seemed half warning, half curiosity. By midday, the wind grew sly, sliding through Aremu's cloak and whispering gibberish that almost sounded like words. By late afternoon, he reached the valley. It was a deep bowl carved into the earth, filled not with trees or boulders, but with silence thick enough to press against his ribs. Only the faint gurgle of water hinted at life. The river of echoes flowed at the valley's heart, a silver ribbon twisting lazily across mossy ground. Aremu dismounted and descended the slope. Each footstep bounced back at him, not as an echo, but as a faint voice speaking in time with his movements. The phenomenon startled him. He paused. The valley repeated softly. He paused. Aremu stiffened. So the stories were true. So the stories were true, the valley murmured, matching his tone so precisely it sounded like a twin mocking him. He tightened his grip on his cloak and walked on. Yet with each step, the mimicry grew stranger. It didn't just repeat his words, it began rearranging them, reshaping them, as if trying to converse. Aremu whispered, I am here to cross. The valley offered back, Are you sure? His heart lurched. The river of echoes had begun. The river itself shimmered like liquid memory. Every ripple carried faint silhouettes, flickering like candlelit ghosts. Some looked familiar, others entirely foreign. As Aremu approached the bank, vague figures rose from the water and drifted toward him. The first figure resolved into something unmistakable. His younger self, 10 years old, eyes too large for a face that still clung to innocence. You left me behind, the boy said, water dripping off him like accusations. Aremu swallowed. I grew up. You forgot how to be brave, the boy snorted, an eerily adult sound. You learned fear. The second figure surfaced. His mother, wearing the gentle frown she'd carried before illness stole her breath years ago. Her presence struck Aremu with sweetness so sharp it hurt. My son, she murmured, why do you chase a crown that could break you? Aremu's throat tightened. Because if I don't go, our home will fall apart. Or perhaps it will fall apart because you go. Her voice tugged at something buried deep, a corner of grief he'd never dared unclench. He reached out instinctively, but his hand passed through her like a breeze. The river whispered behind them, weaving new shapes. More echoes awaited, more doubts, more shadows he had tucked into mental drawers and locked. He stepped back. "You are not real." The illusions answered together, a chorus woven from fear, longing, regret. "We are as real as the doubts you carry." The valley trembled. A third figure rose, this one jagged and shifting, made from fractured reflections. It had his face, but eyes full of scorn. "You will fail," it hissed. "You have always been pretending at courage." Aremu's pulse quickened. The air thickened until each breath felt like inhaling liquid stone. He shut his eyes. The sagely warnings resurfaced. These rivers test the storms already inside you. Aremu planted his feet. "I know you are pieces of me, but pieces do not control the whole." The reflections hissed, but he pushed onward, stepping into the water. It was unexpectedly warm, swirling around his ankles like a living creature. The illusions followed, circling him. Each hurled memories at him. A misstep in training, a moment of cowardice during a palace fire, his father's disappointment, his own wavering confidence. Every doubt clawed at him. The river rose to his waist, its currents pulling like insistent hands. The illusions multiplied. Some wept, some accused, some begged, all demanded a response. Aremu inhaled, drawing strength from a place he rarely visited, the quiet core he usually hid beneath duty and fear. "No more," he said. The valley went utterly still. "I acknowledge you," he continued, voice steady. "Every regret, every fear, every failure, but I will not let you hold me hostage." A faint luminescence pulsed beneath the water. The illusions wavered as if wind had passed through their forms. "I cross," Aremu said simply. The illusions collapsed into ripples, dissolving like ink washed clean. The river's grip loosened. Its water cleared, revealing smooth stones glowing with soft inner light. The far bank shimmered invitingly. Aremu pushed forward, chest deep now, then shoulder deep, until the current gently nudged him onto the opposite shore. As he stepped on solid ground, the entire valley sighed, releasing a tension he didn't know it held. Above him, the sky cracked open with late afternoon gold, as if rewarding him for surviving himself. Behind him, the river of echoes quieted, settling into a serene, harmless trickle. The first trial was done. Aremu turned away from the river, water dripping from his clothes, heart trembling but triumphant. Ahead rose a path winding toward distant cliffs where the next river waited, cloaking its dangers like a riddle unsolved. He whispered to the horizon, "One down." The valley did not echo him. For the first time, it simply listened. Evening stitched itself across the sky as Aremu left the valley of echoes behind. The wind had shifted. It carried a note of something sly, as though the world was already hinting at the next ordeal. His clothes still clung to him with river-cold dampness, but his spine held a new, quiet steadiness. The path grew narrow and twisted, weaving through granite outcrops that looked like half-buried giants listening in secret. Shadows watched him from the crags, lengthening with each step. As dusk deepened, faint glimmers darted between the rocks. Not fireflies, not stars, something else entirely. By nightfall, Aremu reached a high cliff that overlooked a broad ravine. At its floor, the second river sprawled in an intricate coil, the Serpent Current. It wound in looping curves, glowing faintly with pale green phosphor. The water did not flow so much as slither. It moved the way a serpent navigates tall grass, shoulders of current rising and falling with eerie grace. Even from above, Aremu felt the river's presence flicker across his skin, a glance from a creature that understood hunger. According to legend, this water did not kill with force. It dismantled a traveler's senses by weaving illusions thin as spider silk and strong as iron. Aremu descended the cliff with lantern light. Though the lantern's flame behaved strangely, it leaned away from the river as if working up the courage to refuse illumination altogether. By the time he reached the bank, the air pulsed with thick sweetness, like a dream too eager to be believed. A voice drifted from the darkness. Prince Aremu of Orun. He froze. The voice belonged to his father. But his father lay bedridden, miles away, fading like a candle in a room that no longer needed light. A figure stepped from behind a boulder. His father stood tall, strong, every inch the king he used to be. The old king's posture framed authority. His eyes gleamed with unblunted power. Aremu felt his chest tighten. You are not real. The figure smirked, warm in a chilling way. If I am not real, why does your heart leap? Aremu said nothing. The illusions of the River of Echoes had been shaped from memories. This river worked differently. It created what he desired most, what he feared most, sometimes both in one mask. The false king circled him. Return home, he said. Let the elders choose another heir. Spare yourself the suffering ahead. You were never meant for a crown. Aremu turned away, refusing to let the words sink roots. But the river churned at the sound of his resistance. Currents twisted upward into thin spirals, forming new silhouettes. One became Olukorede. Another became his childhood friend Iyanu, who had died years earlier in a border raid. Another became a woman he hoped to marry before duty scattered their paths like startled birds. All of them perfect. All of them alive and breathing. All of them wrong. Iyanu said softly, "Stay with us. There is no pain here, only warmth, only rest." Aremu's lungs faltered. He felt the river tug at his thoughts, knitting illusions with a precision meant to smother will. His lantern flickered, then extinguished entirely. The serpent current glowed brighter in response. The illusions stepped closer, forming a half circle as if preparing a welcome ceremony. Their eyes radiated gentle promises that felt heavier than chains. Aremu forced himself to draw a slow breath. He reminded himself of the warning carved in royal archives. This river is a liar with excellent manners. The illusion spoke again, harmonizing with uncanny unity. Just one step into the current and you can rest. His fingers brushed the hilt of his ceremonial blade. The metal warmed beneath his touch, as though reminding him of who he was becoming rather than who he had lost. "I won't rest," Aremu said. "Not yet." He stepped toward the water. The illusions reacted instantly. Their faces twisted, flickering as if someone had shaken a mirror. Their voices deepened, layered, warped. "You will drown," they said in unison. "The current will unmake you." Aremu met their gaze. "If I drown, you drown with me." He plunged into the serpent current. The water was cold the way truth is cold, sharp, unadorned. It coiled around him, pressing images into his mind, a coronation where he failed to speak, a battlefield littered with the bodies of people he loved, a kingdom burning while he stood helpless. Aremu pushed forward, chest heaving. The illusions glided across the surface, stalking him like shadows giving purpose. The current surged, sending up a twisting column of water that transformed into the serpent for which the current was named. Its body curled into a long arc, eyes gleaming like twin moons submerged in tonic. Its voice rasped straight into his mind. Why fight when surrender feels so gentle? Aremu steadied himself. Because the kingdom is not safe if I choose gentleness over duty. Duty, the serpent hissed, is just a cage built with elegant words. Aremu strode forward, battling the pull of the current. Maybe, but it is a cage I choose." The serpent lunged. Aremu thrust out the ceremonial blade, not to strike, but to remind himself of focus. The blade flashed, reflecting the faint glow of the water. The serpent froze. The illusions around it wavered. The river stuttered, no longer certain of its prey. Aremu lifted his chin. "You thrive on confusion, but I know who I am." He closed his eyes, letting the world narrow to breath and resolve. The river thrashed, pressing against his chest, his throat, his sight. He walked anyway, step by step. With each step, the illusions dissolved into splinters of light. The king faded, Iyanu faded, the woman faded. Even the serpent's towering form melted back into water, releasing a tremor that rolled across the river like distant thunder. At last, the current slackened. Aremu stumbled onto the far bank, falling to one knee as the river behind him resumed its quiet pulse, its hunger satiated or simply reconsidering him. The night sky opened above, jeweled with stars unaffected by illusions. Aremu rose slowly, breath uneven but spirit intact. Ahead, a narrow canyon beckoned, its mouth a dark invitation. The third river had judged him and found him stubborn enough to survive. He wiped water from his eyes, whispering to himself without waiting for an echo or illusion to answer. 2 down. The canyon swallowed the words. The journey continued.
The morning air was dry and brittle as Aremu descended into Emberflow Gorge. The wind carried the scent of sulfur and scorched earth, sharp and unrelenting, biting at exposed skin. The cliffs flanking the gorge glimmered with veins of red and orange, as though molten metal had frozen mid-flow. Smoke spiraled upward from fissures in the rocks, making the world shimmer and warp, like a painting melting in the sun. Aremu's feet crunched over blackened stones, the heat radiating from them like an insistent warning. Here, the river did not slither or whisper. It roared, a ribbon of fire that moved with a liquid grace, licking and curling as if alive. The Emberflow River was no ordinary waterway. It was a river of flame, untouchable and yet irresistible in its challenge. As he approached the first bend, Aremu paused. The flames reflected in his eyes, flickering with their own awareness. The river hissed and snapped at the edges, as if sensing intruders. The stories Olukorede had told rushed back. Some rivers test the mind, some the soul. This one tests courage itself. He drew a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in his chest. "I have crossed echoes and illusions," he muttered. "I can cross fire." The heat intensified. Each step closer made his robe stick to him with sweat. The air shimmered, bending the world into hallucinatory waves. A shadow detached itself from the smoke. A figure emerged, tall, muscular, cloaked in soot and ember, eyes like molten gold. "Who dares walk the Emberflow?" the figure demanded. Aremu drew the ceremonial blade instinctively. "I am Aremu, heir of Orun. I seek passage to claim my destiny." The figure laughed, a sound like cracking stones. "Passage? Few have crossed my river and lived. What makes you different?" Aremu's hands shook slightly, but his voice did not. "I do not cross to escape fear. I cross to face it." The figure's eyes softened slightly. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is knowing fear is part of the river. Come, face it." Without another word, the figure moved aside, stepping onto the first flaming stones that jutted across the river. The flames curled around his feet but did not harm him. Aremu studied him. An ally or another illusion meant to test him? The fire itself seemed to test him. Aremu took a tentative step. The heat seared his boots. He flinched but pressed on, finding rhythm with the river's flow. The flames licked his cloak, yet the closer he stepped, the more he realized that fear, not fire, was the true danger.
Each step demanded focus. Each breath demanded courage. Halfway across, the river surged. A wave of fire splashed upward, threatening to engulf him. Aremu stumbled, panic biting, and his ceremonial blade slipped from his hand. He fell to his knees, heat singeing his skin. "Stand!" a voice roared. It was the same figure, now closer, extending a hand. "You cannot cross bowing to fear." Aremu's fingers gripped the stone beneath him. He rose slowly, gathering resolve. "I will not be broken by fear." The river trembled as if acknowledging his defiance. He stepped forward again, carefully, deliberately. Step by step, the river's challenge shifted from menace to rhythm, as if it were teaching him to move with its current, not against it. Halfway through the final stretch, Aremu felt a surge of weakness. Sweat and heat mingled, burning eyes and lungs alike. And then he heard a soft voice, barely above the roar of fire. "Do not falter, Prince Aremu. Trust yourself." It was not Olukorede, not his illusions. He turned to see the figure from the bank, smiling faintly, extending both hands. The river respects those who choose to keep moving. Summoning every ounce of strength, Aremu leapt the final few stones. His boots scorched, his arms blistered, but he landed on solid ground. The flames shivered, then receded like a tide, leaving the river as nothing more than glowing embers. Aremu collapsed to the scorched earth, gasping for air, muscles trembling from the intensity of the ordeal. Slowly, he rose, feeling the pulse of life returning to his limbs. The river had tested him, not just for bravery, but for endurance, patience, and willingness to risk all he was to continue forward. Behind him, the Ember Flow River hissed softly, satisfied. Ahead, the path narrowed into a shadowed canyon, darker and quieter than anything Aremu had yet faced. He wiped soot from his face, feeling his body ache with exhaustion and triumph. He whispered to himself, voice steady despite his fatigue. 3 down, 4 to go. The mountains ahead held secrets yet untold, and Aremu knew, with certainty that had never been this sharp before, that each river would demand more than his courage. It would demand the very heart of who he was. The next river awaited. The gorge gave way to a narrow path that twisted through jagged cliffs. The air grew colder, carrying a silver chill that pricked Aremu's skin. The Ember Flow River's warmth faded behind him, replaced by a quiet hush that felt almost sacred. The 4th river awaited somewhere ahead, the moonlit divide. Its name alone had haunted his dreams since Olukomrede first whispered it. As twilight descended, the valley opened into a wide basin. Moonlight poured down from a clear sky, illuminating the river like liquid silver. The moonlit divide shimmered softly, its surface calm but reflecting a sky that seemed impossibly vast. Stars hung low, mirrored perfectly in the water, so that the river seemed endless, a mirror to another world. Aremu approached cautiously. Unlike the previous rivers, this one did not roar, hiss, or snap. It waited silently, patient and knowing. Yet he felt its power pressing on him, a weight that had nothing to do with the water itself. A figure emerged from the far bank, stepping through moonlight. Tall and cloaked, it exuded authority. A sword gleamed at its side, though it was not drawn. The figure spoke, voice calm but carrying weight. "To cross the moonlit divide, you must answer truth with truth," the figure said. "Nothing hidden may pass." Aremu's throat went dry. "What do you mean?" "The river is bound to honesty. It tests not strength, not courage, not cleverness, but the heart. You cannot lie to it. You cannot lie to yourself. Step forward with any secret unspoken, and it will consume you. Aremu swallowed hard. His chest tightened. Each step toward the river felt like stepping onto the edge of revelation. He realized the weight of the trial. Some truths were buried so deeply that even acknowledging them could shatter the self. The figure gestured toward the river. Begin. Aremu stepped onto the first stone, then another. The river reflected not the moon, but memories, moments of weakness, selfishness, fear, and shame. Every misstep he had ever taken flickered in the silver light. He glimpsed times he had ignored advice, moments he had faltered before his father or friends, even the private fears he had never admitted aloud. The river whispered, soft but insistent, "You cannot hide from me." Aremu's legs trembled. I have kept secrets," he admitted aloud. "Secrets of my doubt, secrets of my fear, secrets of my hesitation when I should have acted, secrets I have hidden even from myself." The figure on the far bank nodded solemnly. "Speak the truth fully. Only then may you pass." Aremu exhaled, heart hammering. He lowered his gaze and confessed everything he had carried silently. The nights he had feared the throne, the times he had wished someone else would take the crown, the moments when pride or impatience had blinded him. He spoke of shame, anger, and regrets, everything the crown would require him to confront. As the last words left his lips, the moonlight intensified. The river seemed to exhale, waves rippling across the surface like a sigh. The illusions of his hidden fears dissolved into silver mist. The river shimmered again, calm and reflective, but lighter somehow, less burdensome. The figure stepped aside, gesturing for him to cross the final stones. Each step was steadier now. Each footfall carried a lightness he had not felt since leaving the palace. By the time he reached the opposite bank, the moonlit divide had transformed from a river of judgment into a mirror of clarity. Aremu collapsed onto the ground briefly, eyes on the moon above. He had faced the truth he had hidden even from himself and survived. He felt cleaner, sharper, as if shedding a layer of uncertainty that had clung to him since childhood. The figure approached, finally lifting the hood. It was Olukorede. "You have done well," the sage said softly. "4 rivers behind you. Each has tested your mind, courage, and now your honesty. But remember, these are only the beginning. The next 3 rivers will demand not just what you are, but what you are willing to give." Aremu nodded, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He arose, brushing dust from his cloak. Ahead, the path narrowed into shadow, and in the distance he could glimpse the faint shimmer of the 5th river. He whispered to the night sky, voice steady, 4 down, 3 to go. And with that, the journey pressed onward, deeper into trials yet unknown, each river closer to revealing not just the king he could be, but the man he had always feared he was. The path beyond the moonlit divide wound downward into a canyon so narrow that even the moonlight struggled to reach the ground. Aremu's boots crunched on gravel as the air grew colder, damp, and heavy with a sense of waiting. Somewhere ahead, a low rumble echoed through the cliffs, constant, unrelenting, like the heartbeat of the canyon itself. When he reached the edge of the 5th river, Aremu froze. The shadowed whirlpool twisted violently in a dark basin, a churning vortex of water that swallowed light and distorted the air above it. The river did not shimmer like the moonlit divide, nor blaze like ember flow. It was black, viscous, and hungry. Its surface rippled with ghostly reflections of Aremu himself, each image twisted into forms of doubt, fear, and regret. Aremu gripped his blade tightly. One wrong step, and I could be lost forever, he thought. Olukorede's words whispered in his memory. Some rivers test the mind more than the body. A first step onto a slick stone sent shivers up his spine. The whirlpool reacted instantly. Reflections on the water's surface began to move independently, twisting into faces he recognized. His childhood friend, Iyanu, accusing and fearful. A rival noble smacking with ambition. His father's disappointed eyes. Each one called his name, challenging him, mocking him, warning him to turn back. "You are not enough," Iyanu's reflection hissed. "You will fail as all others do." Eremu's stomach knotted. "You are not real," he whispered, but the voices grew louder, echoing off the cliffs. "Not real? Then why does my chest tighten?" The whirlpool surged, splashing cold water against his legs. The river seemed alive, sensing hesitation, exploiting every flicker of doubt. Eremu took a deep breath and forced himself forward, balancing on jagged stones that shifted under his weight. Each step brought a new reflection, each reflection a new accusation, new fear. A shadow of a man, Eremu himself, but older, hardened and cruel, emerged from the water. "You think crossing this river will make you king? You are nothing without certainty, and you are uncertain in every step." Eremu's legs shook. He looked down, and the whirlpool's surface rippled violently, forming smaller whirlpools around his feet. "It wants me to fall," he realized. "It wants me to drown in my own fear." Clutching the ceremonial blade as if it were a lifeline, Eremu spoke aloud. "I am not perfect. I have doubts. I have failed. But I will not let fear control me. I will step forward." The reflections faltered, ripples scattering across the water like startled birds. Eremu moved deliberately, one step, then another, ignoring the accusatory voices. Each stride made the whirlpool resist harder, twisting violently to throw him off balance, but his resolve did not waver. Halfway across, a wave erupted, taller than he had imagined, threatening to wash him into the black depths. He lunged for a jagged stone, bracing himself. The water lashed at his cloak and arms, but he forced his muscles to obey his mind. Focus, one step at a time, one breath at a time. As he reached the final stretch, the whirlpool's reflections became indistinct, fading into mist. The water's grip loosened, as if recognizing his determination. With a final trembling step, Eremu reached the far bank, collapsing on solid ground. His chest heaved, lungs burning, eyes wide with exhaustion and relief. Behind him, the shadowed whirlpool churned softly, no longer menacing, but calm, as though acknowledging that its challenge had been met. Eremu rose slowly, brushing gravel from his cloak. His reflection in a nearby pool looked different now. Not the fearful, uncertain prince, but someone who had stared into the depths of his own mind and emerged intact. He turned his gaze forward. Beyond the canyon, the sixth river shimmered faintly in the twilight, like a serpent weaving through stone. Eremu whispered, steady and resolute. 5 down, 2 to go. And with that, he stepped onto the narrow path leading to the next river, feeling the first true weight of understanding that the throne he sought demanded not just courage, but mastery over every shadow within himself. The canyon narrowed further as Eremu pressed onward, cliffs rising on either side like jagged teeth. Twilight was fading fast, and the air had grown thin and brittle. Ahead, a faint shimmer caught his eye, a twisting ribbon of water threading its way through the cliffs. Its surface was impossibly clear, reflecting every star above with absolute precision. This was the sixth river, the Glass Serpent. Unlike the chaos of the shadowed whirlpool, this river offered no illusions of faces, no roaring or hissing to distract. It was silent, pristine and sharp, beautiful but lethal. Legend said the river's clarity was its greatest danger. One false step could cut flesh, break bone, or send a traveler plunging into the stone-edged current. Aremu knelt to touch the water. It was cold, almost unnervingly so. His reflection stared back at him, perfectly intact, but the river whispered through the windless canyon, almost imperceptibly. One misstep, and it will be the end. He rose, placing one foot onto the first jutting stone. It felt fragile, like stepping on glass in the middle of a storm. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Each subsequent stone was narrower, sharper, and slippier than the last. The river twisted unpredictably, its coils forming angles and curves that challenged both balance and perception. As he advanced, the glass serpent's surface began to ripple, but not from water alone. Reflections moved differently here. Each mirrored image showed him moments of pride and arrogance he had long ignored, the times he had dismissed advice, acted hastily, or underestimated those around him. They stared at him silently, judging. A tremor of doubt shook his legs. "I cannot fail," he muttered. "I cannot let fear rule me again." A sudden slip nearly sent him plunging. His hands scrabbled for balance, barely holding onto the edge of a jagged stone. Below, the river's current whispered, teasing, "Fall and all you know ends." Aremu took a deep breath, closing his eyes briefly. He remembered the lessons of the previous rivers, the courage forged in fire, the clarity from truth, the resilience from confronting fear. One step at a time. One careful, deliberate step. When he opened his eyes, the river seemed to respond, twisting its coils slightly to form a more stable path. Each step now required absolute focus. He adjusted his stride, placing weight carefully, using the ceremonial blade as a balance point. It wasn't brute strength that carried him forward. It was patience, precision, and humility. Halfway across, the stones became thinner, almost razor-sharp, and the current beneath hissed with an almost sentient awareness. A reflection appeared in the water, Aremu himself, older, hardened, eyes cold and distant. "This is who you could become if you let arrogance guide you," the reflection seemed to say. Aremu squared his shoulders. "I will not become a tyrant. I will not fall to pride," he said aloud. With that, he stepped forward more measured than ever, letting discipline and humility guide him. The final stretch twisted sharply, a near impossible angle that tested both nerve and balance. Aremu lunged for the last stone, feeling the edges bite into his boots but refusing to yield. With a final step, he landed on solid ground, heart hammering, body trembling, but victorious. Behind him, the glass serpent flowed silently, its waters returning to serene perfection. It had tested his patience, humility, and perception, and he had passed. Aremu paused to catch his breath, gazing back at the river. He could see himself reflected, unbroken and focused. It was a reflection not just of form, but of character, of growth forged through each previous trial. Ahead, the path led into a shadowed valley where the last river awaited, faintly shimmering in a twilight that felt both threatening and familiar. Aremu whispered, voice steady, almost reverent, 6 down, 1 to go. And with that, he stepped forward, the final river and the culmination of all his trials drawing near, each step heavy with the weight of destiny. The valley ahead was cloaked in twilight, shadows stretching like long fingers across the ground. Aremu's boots crunched on dry leaves and jagged stones, the silence around him thick and expectant. The air smelled faintly of damp moss and earth, carrying with it a quiet hum, like the faint pulse of something alive. At the heart of the valley lay the 7th river, the River of Whispers. Its waters were dark, almost black, but glimmered with tiny fleeting sparks, like stars trapped beneath the surface. Unlike the previous rivers, it neither roared nor burned. It did not threaten with sharp edges of fire. Its danger was subtler, psychological, insidious and relentless. The river could invade the mind, twisting thoughts into doubt, fear, and regret until a traveler lost themselves completely. Aremu paused at the riverbank. The still surface reflected the twilight sky and his own face, but as he stared, he noticed subtle distortions. His eyes seemed older, weary, and full of unspoken guilt. The water seemed to breathe, whispering softly, "Do you think you are ready?" He gritted his teeth. "I have come this far. I will not turn back now." As he stepped onto the first stones, the whispers intensified. Faint voices circled his ears, soft but impossible to ignore. They were familiar voices, allies, enemies, friends, family. They spoke of failures, lies, and betrayals he had carried inside him. Each step forward brought new whispers, more personal, more cutting. "You abandoned your friend," one hissed. "You are selfish." "You cannot lead," another whispered. "You are weak." "You think you are worthy," a third said, "but your heart is full of fear." Aremu shook his head, trying to ignore them, but the river's current beneath the stones pulsed as if feeding on his uncertainty. Every whisper seemed to know his secret fears and regrets better than he did himself. He faltered. His mind reeled. "Maybe I am not enough," he thought. "Maybe all the rivers were warnings, not trials." Then a thought struck him. The lessons of the previous rivers. Courage, truth, patience, humility, endurance. Each river had stripped away illusions, exposed fear, and tested his resolve. He took a deep breath and focused, forcing his thoughts to quiet. "No," he said aloud, "I will not be ruled by whispers. I accept my mistakes, my doubts, my fears, but they do not control me." The river reacted. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of accusation and judgment. Aremu stumbled but pressed on, step by deliberate step. He acknowledged each voice, recognizing its truth, then let it pass without letting it bind him. At the halfway point, a familiar whisper floated above the rest, Olukoride's voice, calm and steady. "Do not falter, Aremu. Only when you face all that lies within can you pass." Aremu closed his eyes. The whispers now seemed endless. His failures, fears, lost opportunities, moments of cowardice and pride, all calling to him. He embraced them. "I am not perfect. I am not invincible, but I am still moving forward." With that acceptance, the river's grip loosened. The whispers faded, becoming soft echoes that no longer carried power over him. He opened his eyes to see the far bank, bathed in the last rays of twilight, waiting for him. One final step brought him onto solid ground. He collapsed briefly, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his brow. The river of whispers lay behind him, calm and still, having given up its hold. Aremu's reflection in a nearby pool was clear, steady, and unafraid. He rose slowly, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. Every river had tested a different part of him, and now he understood. Strength alone could not claim a crown. A ruler must understand themselves fully. Courage, truth, humility, endurance, and the ability to confront the past without being consumed by it. Aremu gazed ahead, where the path rose steeply toward the final plateau. Beyond it awaited the throne, the culmination of all his trials. The journey had forged him into someone far beyond the boy who first left the palace gates. He whispered into the twilight, voice steady and determined. 7 rivers crossed. The final test awaits. And with that, Aremu began the climb toward the summit, each step heavy with anticipation, carrying the weight of his trials, his growth, and the destiny that now rested squarely on his shoulders. The plateau loomed above, a jagged rise of stone and wind that caught the last light of the setting sun. Aremu paused at the base, gazing upward. Every river he had crossed, the echoes, the serpent current, ember flow, moonlit divide, the shadowed whirlpool, glass serpent, and river of whispers, had tested a part of him. Each had forged a piece of the man he was becoming. Now, the final trial awaited, not a river, but the ascent itself. The path was steep, a narrow trail etched into the cliffside, with sheer drops on either side. The wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of the high plateau, sharp stone, cold air, and the faint metallic tang of destiny. It was quiet here. No water to roar, no illusions to taunt, but the climb demanded everything: strength, endurance, and above all, the wisdom to wield the lessons of the rivers. Aremu started upward. The first steps were simple, but the trail soon narrowed to a single ledge. Loose stones threatened to send him tumbling into the void. Each step required precision, concentration, and courage tempered with patience. One misstep could undo everything he had survived. As he climbed, the wind seemed to whisper to him. Sometimes it carried echoes of the rivers he had crossed, the laughter of his illusions, the hiss of the glass serpent, the whispers of doubt. But now, instead of terror, these voices were reminders, lessons rather than threats. He breathed steadily, each inhale a steadying force, each exhale a dismissal of fear. Halfway up, he stumbled. His foot slipped on a loose stone, sending him to his knees. The plateau seemed to loom even taller, impossibly vast, as if testing his resolve. He could feel exhaustion tugging at his limbs, his muscles screaming from the relentless trials. But he also felt the pulse of something deeper, the fire of endurance that had carried him through the rivers. He paused, looking back over the path he had traversed. In the fading light, the valleys below shimmered with silver moonlight and the distant glow of ember flow. Each river seemed to wave him onward, reminders of battles faced and conquered. Aremu realized that the plateau was different from the rivers. It did not test a single trait, but demanded synthesis, the courage, truth, humility, and clarity he had cultivated. Pressing on, he reached a plateau midway up the slope, where visions appeared, not illusions, but glimpses of possible futures. A city in ruin under a tyrant king, a city thriving under a benevolent ruler, faces of people he would rule, smiling, fearful, hopeful. Each vision offered both temptation and warning. Aremu clenched his fists, drawing strength from all he had endured. I am not just climbing for power, I climb for my people, for the kingdom, for the honor of ruling wisely. The final stretch was the most treacherous. The trail narrowed to a knife-edge ridge, wind howling like a chorus of the past, every misstep threatening to send him plummeting into the void. His hands scraped against jagged stone, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But he moved deliberately, summoning the patience of the glass serpent, the courage of ember flow, and the clarity of the moonlit divide. At last, the trail ended at the summit. A flat expanse of stone stretched before him, bathed in the golden light of dawn. In the center rested the ancient crown of elders, shimmering faintly as though alive. It seemed to hum in recognition of him, a resonance he could feel deep in his chest. Aremu approached slowly, every step measured, every heartbeat loud in the silence. He remembered every river, every trial, every lesson. He realized that being king was not about surviving challenges. It was about embracing responsibility, understanding the consequences of power, and serving others with courage and honesty. When he finally knelt before the crown, he placed his hands upon it. A warm hum spread through his body, radiating outward, touching the plateau,
the valleys, and every river he had crossed. It was a recognition, not just of victory over trials, but of the transformation he had undergone. Aremu rose, placing the crown upon his head. The weight was heavier than he expected, but it was not oppressive. It felt like a promise, a responsibility, and a bond with all who depended on him. He looked out across the valleys, the rivers, and the lands he would now serve. In that moment, he understood fully. The rivers had tested not just the prince, but the king he was meant to become. And now he was ready to lead, tempered by trials, strengthened by truth, and guided by the courage to face whatever lay ahead. He breathed deeply, letting the wind carry away the last remnants of fear and doubt. The journey was complete, but the rain had just begun. Aremu whispered to himself, voice steady and resolute, "I am ready. The kingdom awaits." And from the heights of the plateau, the first rays of sunlight bathed the land, illuminating a new era for Orun, a kingdom led by a king who had crossed rivers, faced shadows, and conquered not just the world around him, but the man within.
The first light of dawn spilled over the plateau, painting the land in gold and amber. Aremu stood atop the summit, the ancient crown resting firmly on his head. The rivers behind him, the echoes, the serpent current, ember flow, moonlit divide, shadowed whirlpool, glass serpent, and river of whispers, had all been conquered. Each had tested his courage, wisdom, honesty, and endurance. Each had stripped away doubt, sharpened resolve, and forged him into someone ready to lead. Below the plateau, the people of Orun had gathered. Word of the prince's journey had spread through the kingdom, whispered in villages, markets, and along mountain paths. They came not just to witness a coronation, but to honor a prince who had dared to face unimaginable trials for the sake of his kingdom. The crowd's murmurs rose and fell like the tide. There was awe in their eyes, but also hope. Hope that the boy who had left the palace months ago, uncertain and untested, had returned as a leader worthy of trust. Olukorede, the high sage, stepped forward, robes flowing and staff in hand. "People of Orun," he intoned, voice carrying across the plateau. "The trials are complete. The prince has faced 7 rivers of ordeal. He has confronted fear, illusion, fire, shadow, deception, and the truths hidden within himself. He stands before us transformed, tempered by trial and guided by wisdom." A hush fell over the assembly. Aremu took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every river, every lesson, every moment of doubt he had overcome. He remembered the moonlit divide, where he had faced truths long buried, ember flow, where courage had been forged in fire, the river of whispers, where he had silenced inner chaos to emerge whole. Each memory anchored him, reminding him that this crown was not merely a symbol, but a responsibility. Olukorede gestured toward him. "Rise, King Aremu of Orun." Aremu stepped forward, the crown glinting in the dawn. The wind tugged at his cloak, as if urging him onward. He raised his head, looking over the crowd. Faces young and old, familiar and unknown, all stared at him with expectation. The weight of the crown was heavy, yes, but it was also steady, grounding him in the truth that leadership was about more than power. It was about service, protection, and courage. He raised his hand and the murmurs hushed. "People of Orun," he began, voice steady, carrying across the plateau. "My journey has not been easy. I have crossed rivers that tested not just my body, but my mind and heart. I have faced fear, doubt, and the truths I long hid even from myself. Through these trials, I have learned what it means to lead, not for glory, not for pride, but for all of you." The crowd listened in rapt silence, the wind seeming to hold its breath. "I will rule with courage, tempered by wisdom. I will speak truth, even when it is hard to hear. I will guide our kingdom with humility, remembering the lessons each river has taught me, and I will honor the sacrifices that have brought me to this place, knowing that leadership is not a gift, but a responsibility. A cheer rose from the crowd, swelling like a river itself. Drums beat, horns sounded, and the air filled with joyous cries. Aremu felt the crown settle on his head, no longer merely an ornament, but a symbol of the man he had become. From the valleys below, the 7 rivers gleamed faintly in the morning light, each a silent witness to his journey. They had tested him, shaped him, and ultimately acknowledged his worth. The land itself seemed to exhale, releasing a tension that had long lingered, as if Orun had waited for this moment to finally breathe freely. Aremu turned to Olukoride. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for guiding me, for warning me, and for believing I could endure what others never would." The sage nodded. "The rivers have finished their work, Aremu. Now the true trial begins, to lead with the heart of the man you have become." Aremu lifted his chin, feeling the warmth of the rising sun on his face. The kingdom stretched out below him, alive and waiting. He could see villages waking, rivers glinting in the morning light, and forests stirring with life. For the first time in his life, he felt complete, not invincible, not without fear, but ready. Ready to bear the crown, ready to serve, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He raised his hands over the crowd once more. "People of Orun," he began, voice steady, carrying across the plateau. "My journey has not been easy. I have crossed rivers that tested not just my body, but my mind and heart. I have faced fear, doubt, and the truths I long hid even from myself. Through these trials, I have learned what it means to lead, not for glory, not for pride, but for all of you." A final cheer rose from the crowd, echoing across the plateau. Aremu smiled, feeling the weight of the crown balanced by the weight of his purpose. The reluctant prince had become a king, not by chance, not by privilege, but through courage, wisdom, and the trials of 7 dangerous rivers. The dawn broke fully, bathing Orun in golden light, and from the summit of the plateau, King Aremu looked out over his kingdom, heart steady, spirit unyielding, and destiny fulfilled.